Welcome to the Journos. I'm Peter Martin. Graham McGarry of the Herald joins us alongside Hugh MacDonald and Tam Cowan. Lots to discuss, and you can give us your view by posting your comments in the section below. You can also hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, and if you download the app, you'll get all the breaking news at your fingertips. So, as ever, we like to look at things that are affecting us domestically and in the broader sense in Europe and across the globe. So, spending pennies, banking millions and losing games. Is this the story of Celtic in Europe? We'll discuss that. What price loyalty as another manager gets the boot? We're looking at Billy Dodds, but there are so many others who have achieved great things with their club, and then as soon as they go on a bad run, they are shown the door. Football, simple game, complicated by people who should know better. Are we at this point looking at clubs embracing passing out from the back? But unfortunately, it's a recipe for disaster. And I'll also just charge a glass to Ronnie McKinnon, who sadly passed away last week. And when a great player passes away, it's always good to reflect on what he achieved in the game. So we'll talk about the former Rangers great, and we'll also look at the top 10 biggest spenders in the transfer window to see if it's buying success, and how much you have to pay, and is there a club out there who's actually got it right in the transfer market. So there you are. That should keep us all going, Hugh. What do you think?
Yeah,
is there anything in there that I've mentioned that sets you up for a fight with McGarry?
I hope so. I hope so. Got two Motherwell fans on the show today, so we should.
Well, I mean, I don't want to hear another moan from you. We've got two Motherwell fans on the programme, and there is an area I've left a window open for you to mention Motherwell in all those topics. Okay,
and the highest ever transfer fees. I've got a curriculum up my sleeve.
Right. Okay. So let's look at the first project, which is, of course, what many people are calling Celtic now. The Celtic project is basically, you buy in players, you sell them on for greater profit, and hopefully somewhere along the way in a 1 or 2 year period, you get a team that can do something in Europe. They've got a very good coach in Brendan Rogers, but as you can see in the Champions League this week, it's the same old story.
Very much the same old story, very much. When you look at the game, it was so reminiscent of things that have gone on in the past. I think Carter Vickers was a big miss, but I think when you sell Starfelt and Carter Vickers gets injured, and you're going into a Champions League match with a defence that callow, I don't think it's a surprise when errors happen. I don't think it's a shock when for example, guys lose their discipline, because that's with other young guys. So you're really tempting fate. I thought the sort of real disappointment for Celtic and Celtic fans will be that I didn't think Feyenoord were terrific. I know when Celtic went down to 9, it could have been an absolute thumping. But I thought in the first half, I was quite relaxed about the quality of Feyenoord.
Yeah, having been in Rotterdam, Graham, and spoken to a number of Feyenoord fans, they're absolutely ecstatic with the way Arne Slot's team's playing in Eredivisie. 3 scoring goals, 19 before they went into the game against Celtic. So they're well happy with them. I thought they were mediocre and well worth the placing that they have in the group.
Yeah, and I think that's the frustrating thing from a Celtic point of view, is that if they'd went there and been blitzed 4-5-0 by a team who was playing swashbuckling attacking football, you might have held your hands up and said, right, okay, you're just beaten by the better team. But I don't think that was the case, as Hugh said on the night. I think Feyenoord, obviously they've got quality that Celtic do not possess, but I don't think they showed it last night, and I think Celtic were really comfortable in the game up until obviously they shot themselves in the foot, which is a thing that Celtic have got a propensity for doing. We talk about the guys who were missing from the team last night, but it seems like no matter the personnel that's in the Celtic team, they seem to just find a way to make things difficult for themselves when they're away from home. And the 2 red cards, it sums it up. It is guys with inexperience, I totally accept that, but I think some of the more experienced players, guys that rely on last night, weren't great either.
Picking up on that point, Graham's mentioned the fact that everybody could see the problems with that Celtic side, at the start in the summer. And to suddenly get to a situation where a new manager or a manager coming in for his second stint is well aware that the general feeling is that they're weaker, and they go into it needing a left back, needing a goalkeeper, in my mind, needing a striker. You know, Joe Hart, the goal that he lost on Tuesday night was absolutely reminiscent of so many other goals I've seen him lose to.
Yeah, I just wonder if, with hindsight, maybe one of the worst things Celtic could have done was beating Rangers at Ibrox. That seemed to gloss over a lot of stuff at the time, because up to that point there was all this talk that, right, we need to bring in a recognised player, we need to actually spend money for a guy that goes right into the team, you know, a marquee signing almost. And then the minute, because you know the way Scottish football is, the minute that Celtic got one up on Rangers, it seemed to be that, oh no, everything's fine, everything's rosy. And it clearly isn't when you look last night. I mean, you know, when Motherwell sell players, you know, or when Motherwell have got a lack of bringing players in, it's because we're skint. It's because, you know, every penny at Motherwell is all ultimately about keeping the business running. But Celtic, we keep hearing, we heard it this week, about how much money they have got, the multi-millions, and they don't seem willing to reinvest it in the team properly. Brendan Rodgers was saying in the build-up to the game the other night that what a kind of mark of success for a club like Celtic is European football after Christmas into the new year. Now, it'd be great if you thought he was meaning Champions League football, but because now the way that the whole European competitions, Champions League with 6 teams for England and that or whatever, the way that that's all been kind of ruined back from the days when it was the European Cup and it was the champions that got into it, then that seems too easy for me. You know, as if to think, oh, well, at least we'll drop down a level and we'll get into that other, you know. But it was the same old. And Hughie's right after the game the other night, they flashed up the league table, Celtic at the bottom right away, and you think, how many times have we seen that? Yeah. And if I was a Celtic fan and looking at the amount of money that we've brought in, the amount of money sitting in the bank, I would be bitterly disappointed. Yeah,
well, I mean, the tweet from the aftermath of the game on Tuesday that caught everybody's eye was, bring on the bank balance, Hugh. That summed it up.
It wasn't a great synchronicity, or whatever you call it, that on the same day that happened. And you could have put the tea out for it. A lot of journalists are looking at the figures and then anticipating what was to come, and getting 2 and 2, making 4. The problem seems to be, to me, is that Celtic have a strategy, and the strategy is so successful financially, and it's so successful domestically. You know, all these trebles, 70 million, etc., etc. And this strategy is very defined. It's about players who are, young, who are internationalists, but internationalists obviously at smaller countries, who will come for a certain wage and who will come on a certain transfer, and then they're sold on. And that's working. But the problem with that strategy is it doesn't cut it in Champions League. It just doesn't.
And I think the other thing about it, and again, this falls on deaf ears every year with Celtic, even when their fans, and a large group of them have mentioned this, none of them, Graham, are asking for Celtic to spend multi-millions on players. No. What they're saying to them is, if you're going to go in to the Champions League, don't get embarrassed, but maybe push the boat out a little and sign maybe 1, 2 or 3 players who are that £5 to £6 million bracket. Yeah. That bracket that suddenly gives you a chance to maybe sell them on for 25, 30 million, but they have a certain pedigree higher than what we've got at the moment when we're looking in on Celtic. It's quite simply, we're all looking and going, one for the future. That's the tagline. Yeah. Because Celtic fans just want 1, 2 or 3 sprinkling of gold dust, and then the emerging talents can work off them. Yeah. That's not happening.
No, and it's not just the fans either, Peter. I mean, you heard Brendan Rodgers in the lead up to the end of the transfer window, and he was asking for quality. That was the word he used constantly throughout that week. I need quality. Did he get it? I don't think so. And I wonder how long it'll take before Brendan himself gets a little bit antsy about this. It was a kind of divergence of those opinions that caused a lot of issues the first time he was at Celtic. If you remember when they pumped out the Champions League by AEK Athens, and he was over there with 2 centre-halves, and Boyata didn't travel, and at that point he had a right go at the board about not delivering quality for him, and all these years later it's the same issue. It just has
You
to
wonder
repeat.
what the chat must have been though when he came back.
I'd love to have been a fly in the wall, Tom.
Because you would imagine if indeed that is why he left the last time, he didn't feel he was getting the backing for the board for the European football and stuff like that, then surely to goodness he must have sat down and says, right, what are my guarantees this time around? Or did they tell him plainly, look, it's the same deal, Brendan, you'll need to make do with whatever we give you. Don't go shouting the odds about wanting a player brought in, don't keep coming in asking for money, because it does seem really, really strange, the very fact that he's been there and done it in exactly the same way as before. And and then you got a bizarre thing, if it is all about the just being happy to get into the Europa League, if it ever came a situation where you didn't have these the parachute system where you drop into another tournament when you get beaten one, then you get the feeling that Celtic and Rangers would, they should maybe strive to be second in the league every year. If you took away that, because you think, why get into Champions League, get bumped in the qualifiers and then out? No, you're as well just aiming for the Europa League. But I just think it's, honestly, for what little proper investment is going into that team. We know it's all about money, which is why Celtic, could effectively, play blindfold a lot of league games. When it was 0-0 at half time, Motherwell fans last weekend, 0-0 at Celtic Park, we were thinking if we could get one of St Mirren, we could go top. Everybody round about me was saying, Celtic will score 2 or 3 in the second half. They did, So it's almost as if the money means it kills the competitive edge in the Scottish Premiership, But money as well means that Celtic have no competitive edge when they go to the Champions League.
Well, I can't. I can see them maybe getting a point over what I think is not a great Feyenoord side. I could see them maybe getting something at Celtic Park, 1, possibly 3, Hugh. I can't see them getting points anywhere else. And if I was being super critical of the team on Tuesday, I'd look at it and I'd say Joe Hart passed his sell-by date, crying out for a left back. Their possession's poor. They're a shadow of the side that Ange Postecoglou had as a blueprint and how he likes it played. And for me, and you can only ever look at the evidence, Hugh. I always say to any journalist that ever works here at PLZ Soccer, do not let your eyes deceive you. Kyogo is there and there's no plan B. If O was the answer, he'd be used frequently. He'd be somebody that you could see a spark, something that you see in him that suddenly means he's a battering ram, he's a striker who can, I loathe myself to say Chris Sutton, but of that ilk. But there's no plan B. There's no option other than 3 guys who will run, who are 5'8" average height, and if they don't get the ball to him, you're goosed. Because on the evidence of Tuesday, the new boy Palmer threw the ball into the box twice. There's nobody going to head it. Nobody will score a header for Celtic. In 2003, you had a team that could play football, had a world-class striker, and could also throw the ball in from set pieces, and you knew there was 3 towering guys who would be able to get a goal. That's not there now.
No, but in 2003, you had a team that were hugely successful domestically, got to a Europa League final, and the club lost 70 million.
Absolutely, but I'm saying to you, even in a situation where nobody's asking them to spend 70 million, what they're saying to them is, if you've got a blueprint, if you've got a coach that you brought back for whatever reason, if he's on a remit of, by the way, we're giving you more money than you got the last time, and we'll also get to a situation where if we can balance the books, there's bonuses in it for you. I don't know what's constructed in his deal, but what I'm saying to you is, if you're a good coach, how about option B? How about option C when it's not going according to plan?
That is the thing that's always slightly baffled me is why did Brendan Rodgers come back? Because he's not coming back because he can't get another job. Because I know for a fact he was offered a job in Saudi, which would have, he's a rich man anyway with all his deals and his payoffs, but that would have made him generationally, right? There would be opportunities certainly for him in England. Not at the level of Liverpool, obviously, and perhaps Leicester are in the Championship now, but there would have been opportunities for him in England. So his idea of taking a sabbatical from football seemed to be a really interesting one. A young family, plenty of money, house in Mallorca, etc., and come back. So why did he come back? And I don't know. I really don't know.
Is it maybe just because he's a lifelong fan, he supported him since he was a fetus? You know, maybe he's even back on a voluntary basis. Maybe he's not even taking any money.
Was it guilt?
I think was it ego to come back and say, listen, I'm going to sort of repair what I really don't know. And I'd love to know the conversations about the transfer policy and the transfer strategy, because it is a defined strategy. I mean, you're talking about looking at facts. Just look at everybody that's in the door. They all fit into the one box.
Yeah.
Everybody fits into the box.
Yeah, but I don't mind that box, Hugh. I don't mind people turning around and saying, right, this is our strategy. Here is our DNA. That's fine. But as long as your DNA is saying, well, wait a minute, if we get injuries here, or if we're playing this style and it doesn't work, can we adapt? Can we change? Have we got players that are not similar to each other? You know, I mean, Celtic, more often than not, and even lesser teams in Europe, sometimes have a magical number 10. You know, Callum McGregor is a brilliant player, the best midfielder in Scotland, but he needs help. Hatate's off it. And you've got up front, you're saying to yourself, there is no plan B.
No.
You know?
I think obviously they lost Jota in the summer, and that's like, you can't underestimate how big a blow that is. I know it's financially brilliant, but I know what you're saying. I think there's a middle ground between these project players that they have, guys like Lager, Bielka, who are coming in, and they're not ready for Celtic at the moment, but they're having to be thrust in. And guys like maybe Jota or Carter Vickers, where you spend a wee bit more, and it's sort of spending it sort of to accumulate, isn't it? That's what you're trying to do. So yeah, there's got to be maybe a wee bit more investment in that £6-7 million bracket. As you say, nobody's asking them to go out and spend £20 million.
You were talking about £6-7 million, and it's interesting that the two people that they did buy for that were great successes and made the money.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't get their fingers burned with Jota or Carter Vickers.
No,
Bottom
exactly.
line is, Peter, when you're saying that you thought Feyenoord won that great, but when they went 1-0 up, how many Celtic fans really thought Celtic were going to come back? I think very few.
No.
Well, I've seen it all before.
Absolutely. You've been in the same movie.
I think the manner of the goal as well is deflating, completely deflating.
But the manner of the goal as well is like, then again, these things aren't accidents either. You know, the smallest man in the team's at the end of a wall. Joe Hart is not the Joe Hart of a few years ago, and everybody.
But he is the Joe Hart of a few years ago in one aspect, Hugh. If there is a point where you look at a goalkeeper and say strengths and weaknesses, Joe Hart is notoriously weak on set pieces.
Yeah.
Notoriously, you only have to look back at the back catalogue at Hampden. You know, Joe, you're too far over, and he bends it past him. Joe, he's going to do the same again, bump, and he bends it past him.
Yep,
Joe, you're too far over to the far side, even with a guy who's 5'5". Joe, you're too far over to one post. It was screaming out at you.
I think what masks Joe Hart's sort of fallibilities is the fact that he's such a good presence off the field. And I put this in my piece last night in the game, that I think as time goes on, the sort of balance of his value to Celtic is shifting more off the pitch than on it. And I think it's went too far that way now, where he's seen as a leader, somebody great to have around the place. But if he's chucking in goals at the highest level, then you need to wonder whether that's worth it.
Okay,
You don't fear him, that's the bottom line.
No.
You know, I always go back to that. It's about teams, Celtic, Rangers running out at Fir Park. I've told you this analogy before, and there are certain guys that would come out for Celtic going back, Henrik Larsson, for Rangers, Chris Boyd, even we Alfredo Morelos, I think they're going to score against us. But the same token, maybe when big Fraser Forster ran out for Celtic, you thought that's like Celtic just building a brick wall. We've no chance of scoring today. But Joe Hart, you would think, I'm sure we can get one past him, you know.
Yeah.
His best days are definitely behind him.
well, let's move on from that, but just obviously I want you to try and look and utilise the evidence of what we watched on Tuesday night and spread it across European football and even domestically as well. We're now in a situation, you know, I used the quote at the start from Bill Shankly, you know, football is a simple game, complicated by people who should know better, and there's a variation of it from Johan Cruyff, who says, you know, playing football is very simple, but playing simple football is the hardest thing there is. And I'm watching in the English Premier League, in the Scottish Premier League, which I think is ridiculous at times, people just copying each other and saying, right, we're going to play out from the back. You know, and I'm thinking to myself, you can't play out even if somebody passed the ball to you in the midfield area. You know, and suddenly we've got all these guys playing trying to play triangles out from the back, and you're thinking, this isn't going to work. What are you doing it for?
I hate it, I must admit. Speaking here purely as a Motherwell fan, you know, I'm never too confident when I see us trying that at the back, and particularly, bless him, when the ball goes to Big Bevis Mugabe, you know, because Big Bevis is bomb scare material. I think he'd even admit that himself. He actually had a really, really good game at the weekend, but I'm very much of the Graham Taylor school of tactics here. Get the ball up the park, you know, get it up. You know, you'll only concede goals there by losing the ball, and you're never going to score a goal by having the ball in your own box. Get it up the other end.
Well, I'll contest that, and I'll flip it, Graham.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting don't do it. I'm suggesting that there has to be a variation and a sensibility about it. You know, you've got Joe Hart playing a ball out to Lagerbielke, who is a bomb scare. He's Bevis Mugabe. And then you've got a situation where suddenly you're right back, Alistair Johnson's deep in the corner, and you're trying to play triangles with a goalkeeper who's not the greatest from the back. That's why Pep Guardiola got rid of him. So suddenly they're playing triangles. And I can go back 10 years. Mixu Patalainen started playing it at Kilmarnock, and the players are all looking, going, what? And the fans are all in panic, thinking we could lose a goal in the first 5 minutes here.
I think it's a double-edged thing. I mean, Brendan Rodgers, a couple of weeks ago, we were saying this just before the show, he was saying in a press conference to us, I guarantee you that the stats show playing out for the back is better. All the good teams do it. And it's because you don't really notice the goals when you kick it long and the big centre-half headers it back the way and you lose a goal that way. Nobody looks at that. But when a goalkeeper makes a clanger, like let's say Hart and Leipzig last year, everybody notices it. So it's more apparent when you do it for the back and you don't see the goals that are coming for that. That would be his argument. And as I say, the problem with that is, he said, all good teams do it. Now you need to recognise when you're not a good team, maybe sometimes, and you're limited. I mean, I remember Tam saying that about Big Bevis. I remember Graham Alexander took some stick for the football he played at Fir Park. When he first arrived, they tried to play out for the back, and Bevis Mugabe and Ricky Lamy as the two centre-halves, and they just couldn't do it. So he had to obviously adapt to that situation, and he did.
The thing is, good teams do it. Graham's exactly, good teams do it, and by definition, a good team is a team that's got good players in it. So of course, he'll be more comfortable with it, you know. It's you know, we're forever seeing it. You've seen some teams. Let's go back to Celtic, because they're the team we've been talking about in Europe. When top teams in the past, PSG, Barcelona, have come, let's say, to Celtic Park, and a common kind of cliche with that is saying that, oh, look, even their fullbacks can play football. They could play anywhere in the park. You know, these guys have got that extra bit of ability, but you can almost sense this sharp intake of breath at a club like Motherwell when the ball's getting played about at the back. You know,
Tam, I'm glad you mentioned that, because in his first stint, he was of the same. I posed before the game. I posed the question: will Brendan Rodgers change his tactics? Will he change and learn from the mistakes of before? And the answer to that at the moment, early days, is no. Because in the new camp, Ruffy and I are watching the game, working at the game with our fingers over our hands, because he's asking Doris de Vries to play out from the back against Barcelona. This is at 6-0, by the way. And they're getting cuffed. And I give you my answer to this, Hugh, and you can debate this. I'm saying it's great if you've got the players to do it. Then there's a point where you say to yourself, do I need to do it all the time? Variation in your play, sensibility from the back line to say, right, we're not doing it, I'm going to go long. Not necessarily a boot up the park, as Tam's talking about, where a centre-half can eat it up. And I give you Gary Neville. Gary Neville said Manchester United played with top players, played against Liverpool at Anfield, and the first thing Fergie said to them before they went out, get the ball down the channel and let's squeeze them up in the first 5 minutes so that we're not on the back foot from the start. So what would happen is they'd take the centre, go to the midfielder, and he'd pop it right into the channel for a Giggs or a Cantona or a Beckham to run onto and squeeze them. That's called a manager who's saying, listen, that it's like battleship. There are many ways to win this, and it's not just constantly going ba-bum, kick the ball, ba-bum, long. You know, there's a time to play out from the back, and there's a time to think, how can I put the percentages in my favour? And Fergie was the master of it.
I agree with you there. Playing out for the back is, I think, it's a way to go if you're the superior team, because you're then not giving the ball away. And very good teams, and Celtic, if they were playing, for example, Annan, would be able to keep the ball. They'd be a very, very good team with that gap. And so teams, I remember PSG at Celtic Park keeping the ball. And at one moment, I don't know if you remember this, there was an instant moment where they were playing the ball along the 6-yard box, their own 6-yard box. And Rabiot came back to take it off the keeper in their own 6-yard box. And he was saying, the chances of me giving this away are close to infinitesimal. I mean, I just don't do that. And he didn't. And of course, and it just confounded everybody. So yeah, I mean, I can see if you've got very much the superior resources. But even when you have superior resources, we're talking about the game which is, in a domestic season has tilted everything in Celtic's favour. It's put the Rangers manager under severe pressure. That was won by a long ball, and it wasn't even a good long ball. It was won by a straight kick from the goalkeeper down the throat of the Rangers centre half, unchallenged. It wasn't even a good long ball.
And he made Amelia.
And he made Amelia. Guy heads it back. Kyo goes in and goal. 1-0. Narrative completely changed.
Yeah.
So I see the benefit of using both approaches, and I don't see the benefit of using the approach. I'd love to have a chat. We see somebody like Neil Lennon, next time he's on the show, how he would approach it in playing out from the back in that circumstance.
Yeah, well, I listen, and I hate to...
You realise instantly we've lost all the viewers in Annan, don't you?
He's just done them in.
I don't know where you plucked them from.
I know.
They're basically the worst team in Scotland.
He's thinking about Ardvac. I went from Ardvac to Annan.
He should have said, Motherwell got your backs up and picked a fight again. The only thing I would say on that point that you're talking about there, and this is where, the narrative changes, suddenly from that don't win the 10 in a row, Neil Lennon's a dud coach. He was good enough to beat Lazio home and away, and he was also good enough to work out, I am in the ring with an opponent who is far superior in every position, but I'm going to play a certain way to beat Barcelona at home, because I have, in the arsenal, a Wanyama, height, speed, hard workers in the team who would graft for him. I mean, he even had Adam Matthews at left back. If you look, Mido played in that game. If you look at that Celtic side, they were not full of multi-million pound players, but what they had was a manager who said, right, play to our strengths. They are so good, squeeze them and let them run into traffic in the middle. And if Xavi and Iniesta and Messi can pass through a really condensed midfield and back line, fair play to them, they're world class anyway. And by that time, he'd managed to get a corner, use the height of Wanyama and score. Long ball, bounce, mistake from the defender, Watts scores 2-0. Next minute, eventually Barcelona do get a goal by playing tiki-taka and triangle football. Now, that's all I'm saying. Brendan Rodgers, going back to the original point, and we're talking about players and the way they play, give them the players that they've got one style and then they can opt to another. And I don't see that. And again, as Graham rightly pointed out, you can't play that sort of football. Whether it's if you haven't got the personnel, there must be Plan B, there must be Plan C, and it's not there at the moment.
Even at the Scottish Masters, there was Celtic fans urging Doris de Vries to just put it up the flag.
Brilliant.
So I think it's all it is. It's all down to the personnel, and it's all down to, I'll go back to Motherwell again, but with the best will in the world, Motherwell fans have never watched that sort of play for the back. So, it's a total change than we've ever been used to. And it does just put the fear of God, doesn't you? Because you just don't think you've got the players to do it.
Can I defend Graham Taylor? God rest his soul.
Aye.
Because Graham Taylor, I know you mentioned it, and some people might view it as a negative, but Graham Taylor of his time was successful. That's how he got the England manager's job, because he looked and he said, the old Marcello Lippi, Marcello, what type of football do you like to play? I like to play the type of football based on the players I have at my disposal. Yeah. Graham Taylor had the silky skills of John Barnes, the striker in Luther Blissett, and every now and then he had a supporting cast that would graft their back end off. But his attitude was play to the striker, get the second balls, play in the channels, and press them. That was his attitude, Graham.
I guess the counter argument would be, and I think what Brendan Rodgers would probably say, is that the rest of the world at the top level is moving that way, and they're all playing that way. So unless you want to be left behind, you've got to kind of get with the programme.
Yeah.
But we're in this kind of middle ground now where we don't actually have the players to do it, and Celtic certainly don't at this moment in time. And they're trying to imitate these teams, and they just can't do it. And
incidentally, sorry Peter, I don't know if any you know the answer to this, but when Graham Taylor then became England manager, what can you recall? What was his approach then?
It's still very much the same.
Yes,
Getting the ball up,
still get the ball up the other end.
Which is why Gary Lineker, obviously his career was over, because he took him off, and he could have scored the all-time goal scoring record, but he wasn't his type of player in the system that he was playing. I'm glad you said imitate, because I read something the other day there, and it was like, we're now in a situation where someone said in an article I was reading, I'm watching kids at 11 play kids football, and he says, in the team, he says, we're taking a free kick, and the kid raises his hand up in the air, and he said, none of us knew what it meant. He says, the team didn't know what it meant, because we hadn't even practiced it. He says, it's just everybody imitating it.
I saw the goalie in my wee boys team cleaned his studs on the pitch. It's an AstroTurf pitch. I've just seen somebody do it.
But the way football is going, the big problem about why I think you have to play for out from the back, but not all the time certainly, but I think you have to play out for the back, especially at the highest level, is if you go long all the time, or even most of the time, you won't get the ball back.
No, exactly, Hugh, but that's not our argument. Our argument is, come on, give us your variation as a coach and use some of the skills that you've got in the team. The problem with Brendan Rodgers and other teams who work out what their strengths are is, if you don't play and vary it, there's no plan B, not even a plan C. There's got to be a variety to it.
Look at Ange last year. Ange is a very, he's adherent to one style, and that is it. There's no compromise in Ange Postecoglou. But the point that Tam made earlier is completely right, because he had the players to do it in Scotland. He tried to do it in Europe, said they would not bend, I'll take on Real Madrid and I'll play the exact same way. And they played some nice stuff at times, but they also got scudded 3-0.
Absolutely.
And then 5-1.
I think Celtic fans wanted the whistle to be blown on the hour mark. Just on that point, and we all love, the football purists who want to play a certain way, lovely football, entertaining football. It hasn't gone according to plan for Celtic. And we talk about managers and the players they have available. On the evidence of last season, the players that Billy Dodds had available to him got him to 6th in the table in a Scottish Cup final. Most of the time getting through, albeit he got through at one point in the Scottish Cup, I know, by a bureaucracy and a technical error by one of the Queen's Park backroom staff, but he got them there. He managed to address what was, I think, somewhere in the region of an £850,000 shortfall. And then we look at Billy Dodds this year, 8 defeats, 1 draw, 1 win against Bonnyrigg Rose in the League Cup, and they're at the bottom of the table, gone.
Well, that's the thing, you're absolutely right about last season. Billy kept saying to him, would listen, judge me, judge your team when we've got all the players back. They had horrendous injuries last year, and lo and behold, he was true to his word, because they get stronger and stronger and stronger at the end of last season. But you know the way it goes, Peter, that even though he's maybe eaten in to the debt, and the Scottish Cup run, of course, would have been a huge part of that. Inverness, it's they one of the clubs that are constantly looking up. They're thinking we've put so much money into the club since we dropped down. We want to be back up in the top flight. So there's no way I thought they were going to put up with their team sitting at the bottom of the championship. So I'm not entirely surprised. You immediately, of course, the minute somebody loses their job, you feel sorry there. I've not read too many quotes for Billy, but I'm pretty sure he would have said that he could have turned it round and all that. But this is one of these strange years that, in terms of the money that has been invested in Inverness, and obviously they've not reduced all their debt. The amount of clubs that are desperate to get promotion this year. I mean, Dundee United need to get up. Everybody will say that. They stuck by Jim Goodwin. They brought in players like Louis Moult. They need to get up. They've budgeted for getting up. Inverness, I reckon, need to get up, you know. And you've got other clubs in there. I mean, what's the latest at Queen's Park, for example? They had a right good fist there before. Are they now thinking, right, with this investment in the club all the time, are they looking now? It's a right cutthroat league.
Absolutely cutthroat. Partick Thistle throw into that because of their financial problems. I think, you know, Billy had to go because in football terms, if that record this season, and football, it's a horrible business in that way. It's ruthless.
But it's becoming more ruthless. And there's a short fuse to it now.
I mean, and again, facts will confirm that. If you look at over the years, the average tenure of a manager, I mean, it's in the English Championship, I think it's going down to a year and a half. I mean, and the fact of the matter is, clubs are now saying, don't care what you did. What have you done for me lately? It's not, you know, Scottish Cup final. That was last season. Because the big problem in Inverness is not getting up would be, you know, they're probably budgeted for not getting up. Just budgeted for they want to get up, but they're probably budgeted if they don't get up is going down to League One. I don't think there might be written a flag packet what that would be, but that'd be terrible for them.
But I'm drawing the conclusion, Graham, here that, you know, they're perfectly within their rights, Inverness, to sack him. I'm merely highlighting the fact that people are now sacking them earlier, you know, and on the evidence of it, you say to yourself, well, could he have turned it around? And why did you sack him? And Inverness have said this season's results have not reflected the quality we believe we have in the building. So
I was a wee bit surprised, I've got to be honest, because Inverness are not a club renowned for sort of firing the managers at the drop of a hat. I'm not saying that's a drop of a hat, it's been a terrible record this season, don't get me wrong, but where I feel sorry for Billy is he lost a lot of defenders. He had some bad injuries. They were playing up at Arbroath in the cup and they get absolutely battered that day, 4-0 I think it was. But they allowed him to bring in a couple of defenders, the boy in for Livingston. And Saturday they looked a lot better at Wraith. I mean, it was only a late wonder goal that killed them, you know, and they beat 1-0. So I'm a wee bit surprised they pulled the trigger when they did. I thought they might have given him maybe a couple of more weeks at least to see how these new players settle in.
Did you? And by the same token, I haven't set a trap for you here. By the way, this isn't and now that where your foot has landed, there are spikes. Did you have sympathy for Lee Johnson?
From a copy point of view for the papers, I definitely had sympathy for him. I was gutted when he got sacked. It was brilliant value, Lee, from just a totally selfish point of view.
How's he getting on already at Fleetwood? Do you know?
I think that was a long time coming, I've got to be honest, that one. But that was a pattern that's been going on for a long, long time. I mean, I think you go into last season and he has these peaks and troughs, and people always used to say about Lee Johnson, he pulled out a result, you know, just when he needed it.
Has he done anything at Fleetwood? Do you know?
Don't think so yet, no. I think they get beat the weekend, but I'm not 100%.
Well, you should know because you're our Fleetwood reporter. I gave you that job. You had one thing to do. But as
I loved Lee. I wish he could come back.
I loved him because he wanted 5 transfer windows. And I thought, you're in for a rude awakening here, boy.
That's the way that people have gone to... I think managers and coaches, I think at the very top level, they've got a real reality of now of what's on their plate and how they're going to get that. I mean, there's guys getting sacked from jobs, you know, after 6 months, 7 months, top jobs because they haven't turned it around quickly. One Premier League manager said to me, and he's not a Premier League manager anymore, an English Premier League manager said to me, all you need in England, he says, is one good sacking.
Right.
That's you for the rest of you, that's you set for life.
I
don't know what people were saying about Graham Potter's obviously on gardening leave, you know, so the idea of him it'd have to be a very, very good job for him to take now because he'd be losing his gardening leave money, which would be hundreds of thousands a week.
I'm just looking here. Fleetwood Town, with the interim boss in charge, they won 2-0 against Tranmere, and then when Lee took over, they lost 3-0 to Oxford United. So
working his magic again.
He's got a good group of players.
He's got a pretty scary year, but nevertheless.
But the other thing about Lee Johnson is how unhappy will Lee Johnson be? Lee Johnson's managed 500 games at the top level. That's a lot of money over the years.
And by the way, can I just say in defence of the boy, he must be doing something right along the way to get to 500 games. That's the other aspect of it, and he really does, you know, talk a good game with people, convince chairman that he's the man for the job, and on occasions he has been a good manager to do that job. You don't get to 500, by constantly just going through clubs and and wreaking havoc. He was.
I must be up to 500 appearances on this show.
Yeah, can I just say something to you? You're well past 500, and that's next week's Journos show. Has he been value for money?
What's the chart with the Inverness boss then, the next gaffer? Who's been mentioned?
Well, it's a short term where I think John Robertson.
Callum Davidson's been mentioned.
But John Robertson's interim just at the moment. I had to carry it off. Lee Johnson, incidentally, 3 wins, 5 defeats, 1 draw, and it was a roller coaster, But Billy Dodds is slightly more damning the start to the season. But 8 managers sacked earlier last season. Over the course of the season, 8 gone was pretty brutal, and a lot of them early on, Graham, which is where we're going with it as well.
And it's seeping down the ladder as well, as we say. Like Inverness now, you can't go 8 games without a result,
And can I ask you this? Obviously, from the basis of you and Tam, because he was such a likeable guy and a brilliant player for Motherwell and a legend, I was going into press conferences and continually watching Stephen Hamill look as if he was like a rabbit in the headlights, and then he started to get that kind of a look of there is nothing left. I am exhausted trying to get something out of them. And I sat, and I think it was a Wednesday night, I might be wrong, the St Johnstone game, and they could not string 3 passes together. And then suddenly Stuart Kettlewell comes in and looks at it differently and transforms Motherwell.
It was from a Motherwell perspective, as a Motherwell fan, it was really unpleasant to go through that, and as you say, every week I was going to see him as well, and gradually you just saw him getting more and more lost in the job. He just looked as if he had no answers, and obviously being a club legend, he was heartbroken about that, and you could see the toll it was taking on him. I mean, it aged him 10 years overnight, that job. I actually saw him recently up at Celtic doing his new job, and he looks like a new man, just to be away from that kind of limelight again and the pressure that comes with the job. So it was horrendous to go through, I think, and I hope he's doing well now.
Yeah, it was, because for the minute he took over, it was, I just remember that first game, and he's doing it at touchline at Fir Park, and boy, if there was a guy that was wanting a result for Motherwell, you could tell that he was a Motherwell fan. You could tell that he loved the club, and it's one of these sore ones where when you do get one of your kind of favourites to go in there and it doesn't work out, and even it doesn't even need to be a guy that's played for you as well. I always thought about that. I don't know what Graham thinks, but if there was one guy that I'd have loved to have seen do the business at Motherwell, just because he what he gave Scottish football and how much I loved him watching him as a player, it was Maurice Malpass. I used to love him. I thought, what a player he is. He's your quintessential great professional, faultless at Dundee United. You all loved him there. Brilliant for Scotland whenever he played.
Totally likeable guy.
And you were really willing him to do well, but didn't work out,
Yeah. What was the other?
The end as well. That's the thing. And he is such a lovely guy. It was a shame to see that happen.
What was the other guy that you used? What was his name? I can't believe I've forgotten.
Jim Gannon.
He was great.
He was great. I can't work out a great thing. He was great as that, or he's just great for coffee.
Great for coffee. This is how all managers are judged these days.
Absolutely.
The apocryphal story I dare say about him when I think we played in the Busby Shield, that under 15s thing in Lanarkshire or whatever, and you invite clubs to take part in that. But apparently the Motherwell under 14s or something had beaten Man United boys at Fir Park, beat them 1-0, but they put it up on the scoreboard, and the story went that Jim Gannon was seen out taking a photo to put into the CV for some buyer at a club down south who knew nothing about football, but he would just look, I beat Man United 1-0, right, sign here.
Do you remember when he speak to Sky because he didn't fix his box?
That's right.
Brilliant. Character,
anyway, managers, getting the sack is one of our topics. Of course, we've talked about it, and it's all linked into sometimes a manager's only as good as the players. Can you organise them? If you spend lots of money, does it guarantee success? I think Chelsea are the ultimate, and Manchester United, that you can spend fortunes and not necessarily get the rewards from it. It is down to the manager, and it is down to a strategy and players, how they react to certain situations. And I put together, guys, the changing face of financial football is such now that not just Scottish football, it's just because we're in their back door, Hugh, but right across Europe, lots of journalists that you speak to and players and managers are worried about the imbalance created by the English Premier League. And I look at them now. Chelsea, £397.2 million have spent in the transfer window, and they've spent over £1 billion. PSG, 299 million, just over it. 212 for Tottenham. Man City 206, Arsenal 201, Man United 176, Liverpool 147. Excuse me, Bayern Munich 132 million, Newcastle 131, and Leipzig 130.
It's fascinating figures, isn't it? Because when you strip it of Premier League teams, you're basically left with PSG, which is basically owned by Qatar, Bayern Munich, which is the biggest club in Northern Europe outside England, and RB Leipzig, who are run by Red Bull. So it doesn't give much room for us, and it shows you why the likes of the La Liga clubs, particularly Real Madrid and Barcelona, are up in arms about the distribution of money, about Champions League revenues, why they want a Super League. Because they don't feature there, you know, and you're saying, what, Real Madrid don't feature in the top 10? Real Madrid that would, the star that would bought Puskás and Di Stefano and then Ronaldo and Bale.
Should we have sympathy for them?
No, I don't think so. I don't have some. But I'm very clear-eyed on all this. I'm very clear. I think I'm clear-eyed on all this. That if you run a capitalist sport, and football is a capitalist sport, you can't argue with capitalists spending money. I mean, and businesses doing what businesses want to do. And see, when you start going to bring in, people like to say we'll have to bring in, and they're trying to bring in financial fair play. But as we see, there's so many ways around that. They're trying to pay in wage caps. I don't think wage caps will work because all it takes is one player to go into to court and say, listen, they're trying to artificially depress my wage. They'll not get away with that. I think it's such, football is such a financial free-for-all. And it's the biggest sport in the world. It's a financial free-for-all because it isn't in America. They brought in early doors ways of trying to keep a level playing field. They brought in a salary cap or a salary budget. The club's only allowed to spend so much. They brought in the draft system so that the poorest club gets the best player, etc., to try and keep. But that horse is away from football.
Yeah, but it's also away from football in America because I'd love to see Messi's deal enter Miami because I'm almost certain he's probably got half of Miami, in houses now. There's got to be some kind of a deal that apparently.
I think Apple are paying it, aren't they?
But if you see the revenues that he's bringing in as well, I always remember when Juventus bought Ronaldo, and say it was 100 million. I can't remember exactly, and everybody said, "Oh, he's not worth 100 million." Immediately, the Juventus shares went up by 120 million because everybody knew that the merchandising, everything on the back of getting a Ronaldo was going to change the club.
So who currently, because you're an English football man and indeed European, I'm looking at the teams in your top 10 list here. Who currently would you say is getting the worst return on what they've pumped out?
Chelsea by Ted Bowley's come in and they can't even say by the way you haven't spent money. They just say you're like a man throwing it out there with no pattern, no strategy, whatever. United, for hailing Ten Hag again. I'm now hearing people saying he's for the off. They're starting to grumble about him.
The sore ones, RB Leipzig. I mean, Red Bull. Graham might remember in the 70s. Chan Smith now when Mullow were nearly bought over by the Alpine ginger lorries that come in. It's very similar. Red Bull came in with them.
It's a tough paper.
What could have happened?
Just out of curiosity,
Were you an Alpine man or Bonacord?
I was going to say to you, were you able to buy, that far ahead and maybe say I'll take 6 limeade off your Alpine man?
But no, that was a bit much for us. We didn't have that sort of money. It was 2 bottles you were allowed. You always got a lemonade, but then me and my wee sister were allowed to take turns picking a strange flavour. Because if you call it, they did like pineapple, and they also did a raspberry crusher. So your mum or dad didn't like the flavours. They were lemonade,
Dandelion and burdock.
Did you? Nobody's talking about the Alpine man and the Bonacord man.
I drove one of those.
Yeah,
Part-time job.
before taking over at the Herald, and that's where it seems to go. But I was
So are RB Leipzig, incidentally, are they going great guns?
They're doing well. I mean,
You're your German man.
they'll be. I would say they'll probably be the team. Them and Leverkusen will probably. My team's no use this year, Dortmund, but Leipzig.
Of course, they got money, didn't they, for Szoboszlai
and they've got a good model for selling because Nkunku went to Chelsea as well. So I think there'll be a Champions League team in Germany, but nobody, even now, I'll say nobody's going to take the Bundesliga from Bayern.
And if you're looking for clubs that are absolutely, I think, investing and then making money on it, everybody talks about Brighton. I looked at between 2017 and 2021, they spent 208 million just over it and made 37.17 million in sales at that point. And now, it's 321 million pound in player sales in the last 12 months and 244 million in profit. That's from this 12 months alone.
That's incredible.
On that, and undoubtedly, Hugh, and I know you're ready to enlighten us of it, but undoubtedly, a team that finished sixth, they're in the Europa League, they will have then invested that again.
Oh goodness, yes.
Yeah, in players.
Aye, and the wage will be onerous as well.
But everybody's
Also,
suggesting they've got a seat. That I read an article that said that the chairman's not giving out their blueprint. It's a wee secret. This is a secret. Is it a variation on Moneyball? Have they got some brilliant tracker device, an app that tells you exactly who's doing the best crosses, who's got the best engine?
well, the thing about it is now that the whole thing with modern football now is that it is about data. You very rarely find a club that will take a scout's word over data.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
the days of the guy in the sheepskin coat coming back and say, "Oh, see that, number 7 for Mary Hill, we have to get him." Right? What's the data on it? And clubs are all over it because clubs realise that if you're a Celtic, a Rangers, or whatever, if you're a Motherwell, you've access to the same data. Now, admittedly, you've got to go down the data, but you've got access to the same data, and people are making decisions on not only on data, but people are making decisions to fit boxes. We talked about the Celtic box earlier. You know what they're trying to buy and what their strategy is, and they're fitting that data into a box.
Before we finish, a couple of wee things that I want to get, Graham's thoughts, Tam, and yourself as well. Just a word, and probably your best placed, and Tam, you'll forgive me for this, and Graham, but he is Obi-Wan Kenobi. I was going to say to you, I love the way you written journalists always have a doyen. I'm not sure if it's a criticism or praise. Over the years, there's been a few. By the way, when I hear them saying the doyen, when I used to go on European trips, I went, that's because he moans all the way there and all the way back. Ronnie McKinnon passed away at the age of 83, and again, if you are of a particular vintage, he would be somebody that I think a lot of Rangers fans would look on with great affection.
Absolutely. I mean, a top class number 5 for Rangers in Scotland, very successful, played in the T2 game at Wembley. Nice story about him was that him and I think it was his brother Donnie McKinnon and certainly Sir Alec Ferguson were at Benburb, and they were in the Benburb youth programme, and after a year Benburb said, "We're stopping the youth programme," and Alec was outside with Donnie and Ronnie and said to Donnie, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, that's my only 15, and what am I going to do with the rest of life? I think he did all right after that. But, and Donnie said, well, I've got a trial up at Partick Thistle, and they ended up with and he turned round to Ronnie and says, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going over there. Ibrox says, I'm signing from them today. So that was
not a bad youth policy, was it?
So Ronnie was a terrific player for Rangers. In no way a derogatory term, an old-fashioned centre half. Quick, strong, good in the air.
And on that final point, amazingly, if you are of a certain generation, he also played in the European Cup Winners' Cup final in 1967. Rangers lost it narrowly, 1-0 after extra time. That could have been a year where Celtic and Rangers both won the two top trophies in European football, which would have been absolutely incredible. 2 leagues, 4 Scottish Cups, 3 League Cups, and a runner-up in the Cup Winners' Cup final, which is absolutely amazing. Before we go, we talked about transfers, people signing. Can you give me... I've picked out 5 or 6 players that I thought were unbelievable transfers to a certain club down through the years. I've got Cruyff to Barcelona, Maradona to Napoli, Dalglish to Liverpool, Cantona to Manchester United, Van Basten to AC Milan, Di Stefano to Real Madrid, of course, Larsson to Celtic, and possibly Butcher to Rangers. What about yourself?
Right, well, I won't steal Graham's thunder, having spoken before we came on air, but 3 years before Davie Cooper signed for Mull for 50 grand, which I believe he got in his skyrocket as a wee thank you. 3 years before, a lot of people forget, we get Bobby Russell on a freebie. Wow. He was released by Rangers, and it was Bobby Russell, I always say, that started making that team tick for Tommy McLean. It was majestic watching him, and then 3 years later, when he got his old buddy to play alongside him, and suddenly had Cooper and Russell in the same team, we were spoilt rotten for a long period of time. Most notably, October 1989, you're deep into the season then, when they crafted a 1-0 win against Rangers at Fir Park, and we went top of the league. And you had guys, as you could do then, I remember the queue, getting down to the petrol station nearest me, called their service, garage petrol station around about midnight to get the next day's Daily Record, because I knew in the back page you'd have at least the top of the table. And when I went down as well, there was actually such a lovely memory. There was a queue in Motherwell fans. This wasn't folk looking for packets of fags or paying for fuel. They were all waiting in the papers to come in. They just wanted to see it. Yeah. So I'm going to give Bobby Russell, because Cooper was so great, because of the unquestionable impact that he had in the club. Sometimes Bobby gets a wee bit overlooked, which I always think's a bit unfair.
Okay, you're going for Bobby Russell. What are you going for?
I'll go for Cooper. I mean, that's just that was the kind of age where I was starting to go to games regularly, and a couple of years ago, when my sons have started going to the games as well, I was saying to my dad, when you first took me, the 2 wingers at Motherwell was Bobby Russell and Davie Cooper. And at that point, for Motherwell, it was Sherwin Seedorf and Jermaine Hilton, so you can see where it's kind of tailed off a wee bit, no offence to those guys. But just, I think, for the way he transformed the club, I remember the day he signed, and I used to stay in the house in a estate, and a guy shouted out the flat window, Davie Cooper signed for Motherwell, 50 grand. And we were all, right, on your bike. That wasn't quite what we said, but words to those effect. Yeah. And that was true, and I couldn't believe it. My brother's a blue nose, so even he was like, no chance, you're not getting Davie Cooper, and there it was. But I think the word that Tam used there, transformational, and I think that he just dragged the club up. I think everybody says it that played him.
And you know what? It's one of a couple of things that I've done with him in the past, and he said it in both occasions. It's one of the few regrets that Graham Souness has in football. Certainly when he was in Scottish football, he knew he'd let him go too soon, But it was at a time probably Souness came in and thought, MD of a certain vintage, right? I've got to get them out and I've got to do the main thing here, But we get it was, and it was, a lot of folk forget it was like 3.5 maybe seasons that we got. But then, of course, when Davie left Motherwell, I remember going, because my mate who used to run the line in senior football, going to see Cooper again. He played for Clyde. He went back to Clydebank, a lot of folk forget, and he played against Hearts in the Cup. And I went, and he still had it. He absolutely still had it. It was great. Tragic loss.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to say farewell without giving you the last word on this, Hugh. But I'm just going to say right now, apologies to Graham's brother, who obviously is a Rangers supporter, but Graham mentioned him as a blue nose, as if it was some kind of, a road that he'd taken down, which was the wrong road. So apologies to Graham's brother. I know you.
Black sheep.
There's always one.
One I'll add to this, it's of a certain vintage, and only people probably my age will realise this. But Dave Mackay going to Derby County, he was he thought he was done. He'd broken his leg a couple of times, and he lifted Derby County to a title under Brian Clough, so that'd be one for me.
Yeah. Another one, a nice one in terms of somebody that's in a proper effect. You'll know the name of the guy. So who was the guy last year or the year before? Was it in the Spanish leagues that he just wanted to go back to his hometown team
Ramos.
and help them, and he certainly did. He went in there and on his debut he scored a couple of goals and he really lifted them, and that was
Ramos has done it this year.
that was an incredible story.
Before that?
I think it was doing lower leagues we're talking, but it was like a proper fairy tale story. And look, I know you like we mentioned the Kenny Dalglish, right? Now that's still, you think, 440,000. That's that one. Every kid in Scotland remembers that transfer fee. Have you any idea, without having to Google it now, what sort of money would that be now? 440,000.
I think it's about
still a steal.
Being a Dalglish fan, I think it's about 189 million. So now that
Cazorla just on that.
why let the facts get in the way of a good story, Hugh?
Are we out of time?
Cazorla.
It was Cazorla.
Is that the boy I mean? Aye, it was a total fairy tale kind of story. Yeah.
Just
Magic.
Are we out of time?
Okay, I can't tell you.
Oh.
At this point, by the way, I kid you not, our producer has just said to me, I did a one of these conversions on the calculation of and it's about 3 million. 3 million short of 189 million.
That's all it is.
No, it's 3 million for Ken Dalglish.
Wow.
That's outrageous.
So that was done, by the way.
That's done, mate. I'll say cheerio. You get
No,
something else
just
you want to say?
well, I was going to give you my full insight. I've been trying to learn more about the European scene rather than just be Scottish and
You
parochial.
couldn't even remember Cazorla.
Well, I was going to give you my full take on last night's Bayern Munich Man United game. Will I save that?
Yeah, do, because for other reasons. Anyway, that's Tam. That's Tam trying to confuse you on when we actually recorded this bloody programme. But anyway, thanks to Graham. Thanks to Tam for being here today and last night and the night before, and thanks to Hugh McDonald. As ever, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. Thank you to so many of you who are joining the football family, and from all the team here, hopefully you'll watch next week's Journos. Don't forget also, we've got the football show, we've got Straight Talk, there's a brilliant one-to-one with Billy Sloan and some belters coming up on that programme, as well as the women's football show, and we'll be back for the weekend Scottish Premiership. From everyone here, thanks for listening on the podcast and thanks for watching on the channel.